Welcome to the World Beyond. I'm your host, Joe Weigant. Today we're going to be talking about everything out there beyond our natural world. Our guest today is Mary Jane Morris. Mary is a board-certified naturopathic doctor, an herbalist, certified in numerous forms of therapeutic massage, an acupuncturist, and owns Healthy Habits, a store in Evansville, Indiana, that offers all her unique services, plus handmade, all organic and natural health and beauty products, including soaps, lotions, teas, creams, salves, and deodorants. Mary, welcome to the World Beyond. We're excited to have you with us.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
So, tell us just a little bit about your journey. How did you come to enter into this field, and what brought you to the place that you are today?
Oh, it's a long story. I've always had some kind of a connection to nature, and I was actually working in a bank. Was driving home late one night. This is when banks used to close late at night, and I was hit head-on by a drunk driver on the road coming home. I was trying different therapies to help my neck because I injured my neck in the accident, and nothing was really working. So I went to another doctor who had a massage therapist on staff. And this is, 30 years ago when massage therapy had a very negative connotation attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
So when he mentioned to me that I was going to have a massage for my neck, I was a little taken aback. And then when he introduced me to the therapist he had, and she was explaining to me what they do and how it's actually a therapy, I was a little bit more relaxed. And then she worked on my neck, and it was actually the first time I experienced relief in my neck since the accident. Now, I was going through some changes at the time and looking for a change in my life. And I thought, well, this is kind of an interesting field. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the doorway of alternative stuff, which, actually to me is interesting that we call it alternative medicine when it's really the original medicine that we actually have. But we've westernized everything, and so from there I moved on to acupuncture, and there's a story with that too, but I that's long-winded. And then I went to medical school to become a regular doctor, but found I didn't quite like that way of work. So I changed to naturopathy. So that's how I made this course.
Isn't it funny that the original things that have been around for thousands and thousands of years are now considered alternative because the last 50 years we have an advanced medical procedure.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. We'll get into some of that later when we start talking about traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture and all those kinds of things. That these things have been around for thousands of years and have been proven to work, but because Western medicine doesn't accept them, they don't have the public awareness that they should have.
Right, I agree. It's really funny because, like you say, it's not the public awareness. I think the public does have an awareness, but they seem to have more of a fear now because of the way that the westernized medical culture has taken over the community. It's made it interesting for somebody who would want to try something like acupuncture, for example. They
Absolutely.
Actually are very apprehensive.
Well, we're going to take a break here in just a few seconds. We're really excited to have you aboard. And you are listening to The World Beyond, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. You're listening to The World Beyond. I'm your host, Joe Weigant, and we're talking to Mary Morris today. Mary is a naturopathic doctor, an acupuncturist, and an herbalist. And we're discussing all things that are outside the realm of the modern medical procedure today. Hello, Mary. How are you doing again?
Doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're really excited to have you with us today. So, what is a naturopathic doctor, and how is that different from let's say, a standard family physician?
Okay. Well, there are actually two types of naturopathic doctors. One is actually a medical doctor, an MD, who goes through a program where they learn about herbs and acupuncture and some natural remedies. The other is considered a traditional naturopathic doctor, and that's what I am. We don't go through the medical school part of training. We still have to start with some of the medical school training, but we switch off completely and then go just the natural route. So we learn about body work, we learn about acupuncture, herbal therapies, homeopathic, Ayurvedic, a whole gamut of naturopathic or natural modalities. What we do that's different than a traditional doctor is that we do not prescribe pharmaceutical medications or perform surgical procedures. So we like to do more preventive type of stuff than working on symptoms.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you can stop the problem from happening, you don't have to go back and try to, correct a problem that's already taken hold.
Right. And the other difference, too, is when someone does come to us with a symptom, instead of just saying, okay, well, here, let's do this and mask that symptom, we try to look for the cause.
Absolutely. So I think most of us here in North America understand what it's like to go to a family physician. You go in and you give a medical history. You have to provide an insurance, and then you see the doctor about whatever issue is going on, and he will either send you to a specialist or try to prescribe some kind of a medications. How is it different when someone goes to a naturopathic doctor?
Well, when you go to a medical doctor, a traditional Western medical doctor, the way that our system is set up is it's designed around the insurance that the person has. And that's the sad thing. So when you call to schedule an appointment, one of the first things that you'll be asked is what type of insurance do you have? And then what that does is it allows the physician to understand how long they can actually work with you and what they can actually recommend for you. Because some insurances will not allow certain types of therapies or certain treatments or even some tests to be done. The difference between that type of physician and what I do is if someone comes to me, I will sit with them and do a complete evaluation. Sometimes that evaluation will take 2 hours. And I go through their whole health history, and we try to find out exactly what's going on and what would best work for that person. And so it's a little bit more of a lengthy process. It's not a quick fix, where if most people who go to a medical doctor, a Western medical doctor, are expecting to leave with some kind of a prescription to help with their conflict, whatever it is that's bothering them, when they come to me, they get more recommendations to try to make lifestyle changes or foods that they may need to help balance digestive issues that they have, instead of me just giving them a prescription for something and say, try this.
I've noticed that is the one of the major differences is that people who go to seek Western medical intervention are often looking for a quick pill or some other kind of procedure that will not force them to try to make a lifestyle change, whether it's dietary or thought process or any other kind
Exactly.
of exercise change. But they want to still live the lives that got them into that situation, but they just want the pill to make
Right.
the symptom go away
That
so
little
they can still
magic blue
keep
pill.
living the damaging lifestyles that they've lived up to that point.
Hmm. Yeah, and they a lot of them don't even recognize that that's what they're doing. And then they'll go back again if that medicine doesn't work, and they go back again and get another one and get another one. Instead of making the change that they need in the first place, which would alleviate the whole symptom. So
Add
it's
add
an
to that the
interesting.
fact that if you prescribe one pharmaceutical, it creates side effects that then have to be treated with some other kind of pill. And next thing you know, you're taking 17 pills and you still haven't treated the original problem yet.
It's almost like a game.
It is almost like
And
a game. Absolutely.
what I don't like too about the pharmaceutical industry is they'll make a pill and say it's a 500 milligram pill, and that pill will be given to every person, regardless of whether they're male or female, regardless of their age, regardless of what they have going on with them. And that 500 milligram dose may be good for some people, but for others, they may need 200 milligrams or 700 milligrams. So it's not a specific result, but people will take it. So it's one of the things that really interests me, because if you're going to give a prescription to somebody, it should be for that person, and not just written off of a pad and handed to them and said, okay, here, go get this.
Have you noticed in your time
Years ago, it used to be that way,
practicing naturopathy?
where,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask you, in your time that you've been doing this professionally, have you noticed that people are more apt to argue or question your advice where they wouldn't even hesitate to follow the advice of a white coat doctor that just basically scribbled something
Yes,
on a notepad and handed them a pill?
yes, absolutely. And I'll give you an example of that. I had someone come in to see me. They had a fungus under their nails, and they were wondering what they can do about this. And so, I looked, I evaluated, and then I said, why don't you just soak it in a vinegar water solution? And they just looked at me like I had 10 heads when I said that. And isn't there anything else that I can take? Isn't there something I can do? And I said, well, it appears to be, something that I would try this solution with first. And so they left, and I had no idea whether or not they tried it. But they called me back a few days later and said they went to a dermatologist because they were concerned about this fungus under their nails. And when they went to the dermatologist and had to pay a $55 copay, the dermatologist said to them, why don't you just soak it in vinegar water?
Isn't that
And
funny?
so she called me to say, no, I should have just listened to you. But they don't. They want that secondary recommendation or that secondary thing that's going to make them think this. Okay, this makes sense.
And vinegar's what, about $2 a gallon? And can be used for
If
about
that much.
30 different uses around the house and in your diet and for health
Hmm.
reasons, and it has all these other uses and these benefits, and yet somebody would question the $2 solution and go pay $55 to hear the exact same thing.
Right, and I didn't charge a copay.
Yeah, well, I'm actually glad in my Reiki practice that I don't do insurance billing because that would just be a nightmare.
Hmm. Well, they used to take insurance for massage years ago. And in the 1990s, they stopped doing that because they said people were taking advantage of the having massages, which, really, that makes a lot of sense, they're taking advantage. but they stopped and they never put it back on again. And it was actually quite easy to submit and to get paid back. It really wasn't that big of a hassle. I kind of wish they did still include it in the side.
Do you think that if the medical community would allow more referrals to services like yours, would that be more or less acceptable, or would practitioners like yourself have to jump through more government and insurance and pharmaceutical hoops in order to be more readily referenced by other doctors?
Today, they actually do a lot of connection with alternative practitioners. And there are some hospitals even that have connections directly with alternative practitioners. Some even have them on staff, where they'll have like a table, a meeting of the minds kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they'll have the cardiologist, and they'll have the nutritionist, and they'll have the acupuncturist all in the same room and discuss a patient or a client. And then they come up with the best plan for that person. Unfortunately, they don't do that everywhere.
Right.
So, but yeah, it does make my degree have a little bit more credibility if I do get a referral from a Western physician, as opposed to somebody down the street, or your friend. Then people will say, oh, if Dr. So-and-so says, Dr. Morris is okay, then I'm going to give them a try.
Sure.
So,
in my own practice,
we put so much.
I sometimes wish that we were more accepted in the medical community, and in some places it is in hospitals. But then again, I'm kind of glad that Reiki isn't that far accepted yet, because then we would have to bend to their requirements, and Reiki is so individual that I don't think it would do that. I think that naturopathy might fall under those same kinds of things. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, but I don't know what kind of restrictions they would put on it other than maybe time,
mm-hmm.
Because it's such a completely different practice. Just like the herbal field, they really can't regulate it. They want to.
Yes, they do.
But they can't.
And sometimes that's the issue with letting government come in and regulate too many things, is that everybody has to fall under somebody else's rules.
Right.
Well, we're just about finished with this segment, Mary, and we'll come back in just a few minutes and discuss a little bit further about your practice and your business and how you get things done here. Folks, you're listening to The World Beyond. I'm your host, Joe Weigant, and for more information, you can always see the website reikichoice.com. Welcome back. You're listening to The World Beyond. I'm your host, Joe Weigant, and today our special guest is Mary Morris, who is a certified naturopathic doctor, an herbalist, and a massage therapist, and she owns Healthy Habits, a store in Evansville, Indiana that offers unique, handmade, organic health and beauty products. Welcome back, Mary.
Thanks, Joe.
I want to get into acupuncture here for just a moment. I've had this done a couple of times, and it was extremely effective for me. Can you give us just a example of how it works? I know about the meridians, and I know about a little bit about traditional Chinese medicine, but how does the act of placing needles on the pressure points actually restore health?
Well, it's interesting. It's not exactly known how it works, but what's even more interesting is you don't have to just put needles on the point. With acupuncture, it could be done with a number of modalities. You can do ice, you can do heat on the spot, you can do electric current, or the needles, which is the traditional way that most people are familiar with. But what happens with acupuncture is the whole premise is that the body is electrically charged. We actually give off 1.5 volts of electricity. So if you hold a light bulb in your hand and you stand next to an open electrical circuit, the light bulb should light up. It might be dull, but it'll have a light. So keeping that in mind, if you know anything about electricity and how it works, electricity travels in a current, and there's a circuit that carries that current. And it's either a direct or an alternating current. So we have, and it's measurable, 14 major energy flows that go through our system at any time that they call meridians, and you're aware of this. But the belief is that by stimulating certain points on these meridians, that it'll bring balance back to the meridian if the flow is not going the way it's supposed to. And the way that these points have been found, they've been measured actually with electrical devices that prove that they're there. But how did they know this 20,000 years ago? That's the big thing. How did they figure this out? It's amazing when you think about it. But what happens when you stimulate these points, either with tapping or pressure or ice or heat or electric current or needle, it actually will either draw energy to that point if the point is deficient, or it will deflect energy away if the point is overly in excess or overly excited. And again, they don't know exactly how it works and how the body knows to make it happen, but it does. It's pretty cool stuff.
It really is. It's fascinating. I've been studying martial arts since 1987, and we use the meridian theory in order to use the kata that was developed hundreds of years ago. Those katas actually mapped out what points to strike or what points to manipulate to create the effect we want to create in an opponent. And they were using this theory, 1,000, 2,000 years ago to fight out on the battlefield. They knew where to strike and what to do and what to hit, and they used the same system that's used for health and well-being and wellness to win a fight or to disable an opponent. And it's just amazing that they knew that much so long ago, and yet we still can't bring this to the West and get people to understand how this system works.
Well, I think that's only because since traditional Western medicine has come into the light, they've really disbanded anything else, making it seem like it's voodoo magic or whatever. It's just not acceptable any longer in our society, or it's so what's the word I'm looking for? It's just so ancient that it's not something that we should use anymore. We need to do something more modern. So it's interesting that we've gotten away from these traditional medicines.
Absolutely. It goes right back to what we were talking about before, about having to take, make lifestyle changes in order to affect health, as opposed to still living in the damaging way that we were living, but just taking a pill to mask the symptoms. Knowing about the meridians and the pressure points and knowing about energy kind of almost begs us to change our lifestyles to live a better life in order to achieve better health.
Yeah, it's too much of a focus for some people to have to
Yes,
think about how to be healthy instead of just saying, I'm going to go to somebody else and have them tell me how I need to be healthy for myself.
exactly. So, in my practice of Reiki, I've learned that oftentimes the real cause of the physical ailment is an emotional aspect. And I believe
Hmm.
Deepak Chopra even wrote in one of his books on energy healing that 85% of our physical ailments can trace their roots back to unresolved emotional issues. And I've found
Hmm.
this in my practice. Have you also found this in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing because there's there's been some people who've come to me with certain symptoms, and after talking for a while where they don't disclose something, I might kind of say something like, "Oh, have you experienced anything like this in the past few months or the past year?" And they'll say, "Yeah," and almost surprised. And it's amazing how you can actually make yourself not well, um, just from a perception of something or by a negativity, thinking something negatively, or not letting go of something. So interesting.
Do do you think that people hold on to some of these negative emotional aspects because they either fear expressing those things, or is it a fear of having to go back and revisit that painful memory in order to forgive that event, whether or not the person that caused the harm is actually in front of them or not? But is it the quality of just dealing with the event in a healthy way, or is it they refuse to deal with the situation, or are they holding on to the blame for that situation? What do you think causes our emotions to run rampant that way?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, and actually even more components to be maybe added into that. But you got to figure that sometimes a person is afraid of the unknown,
Hmm.
so they know that how they feel under these circumstances, and they're afraid to maybe feel how they would be if that wasn't there.
I've also experienced that. Yes,
So
good
that could be
point.
one reason why they don't want to let go.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of reasons that a person won't let go of something. And yes, fear is huge. It's at least in my understanding and my belief.
Hmm.
And then, they can make themselves to the point that the body gets so destructed internally, externally, that sometimes there's no return.
Hmm. Well, we as humans store our emotions and oftentimes experience these emotions through our gut. That's where the old saying's a gut feeling, or I can feel it in my gut.
Hmm.
Sometimes we just know things in our gut, but also we experience fear and dread and anger and all these other kinds of things
Hmm.
in our gut. And our gut is
Hmm.
where the immune system is. And a lot of these
Hmm.
chronic diseases that people are experiencing today in modern world all trace their roots back to an overactive or an underactive immune system. They're all,
Hmm.
autoimmune deficiency symptoms. So, have you found that people who hang on to certain emotions or tend not to let go to the trauma of certain events in their lives tend to wind up experiencing some of these major difficulties?
Yes, a lot of people will have digestive issues for sure. And what's interesting is in the Eastern philosophy and with acupuncture, the small intestine is very connected to emotions,
Hmm.
and that's where we digest our food. That's where it's absorbed into the body to give us nutrients. And when I work acupuncture with people, a lot of times if I have concerns that they have emotional issues going on, there's one specific point that I'll work almost every time, and it's small intestine number 3. And if they are experiencing a lot of emotional stuff going on, I'll find that point is very sensitive on them every single time. And it's interesting, and that is, again, it's a small intestine point. So it's digestive, it's absorption, it's nutrition. It's where we get our food absorbed and sent through the system, and our vitamins and minerals. That's where we absorb everything, and that's also where we hold all of our emotions. So it's really interesting.
So on one level, the small intestine processes food, but on another level entirely, it processes events and emotions.
Right, or it holds on to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's one of the first places that I look to when I'm treating someone who I feel, like I said, is emotionally distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll definitely do those acupuncture points.
Are there things that you can tell people that would alert them to the idea that their conditions aren't entirely physical, but may have a deeper emotional construct?
Yes, and it's hard to do that sometimes with people because, again, perception is really a huge role in how a person works, what's going on with them. And if you start telling them, well, this isn't physical, sometimes they start thinking, oh my God, I'm crazy. There's something going on with my mind. And you have to address it with them in a way where they don't feel that. You have to let them know that this is completely normal and that, everybody reacts in this way. And so you just need to internalize a little bit and figure out what's going on, or not internalize. I'm sorry, that's not the correct word. More introspect is the better word to use. To figure out what is actually going on and then work with that. And I think once a person comes to a realization, they are able to resolve it a lot faster and heal themselves a lot easier.
Precisely. Well, we're going to get back to that in just a few minutes. You're listening to The World Beyond. I'm your host, Joe Weigant. We are talking with Mary Morris today, and we're learning all about energy and emotions and illness, and we'll be right back in just a moment. Please visit ReikiChoice.com. Welcome back. You're listening to The World Beyond. I'm your host, Joe Weigant. Today we're talking to Mary Jane Morris, and we're talking about emotions and health. Mary, whenever you're working with somebody in a therapeutic massage session, how can you determine some of these things that we've been talking about, how emotions are carried in the body, how they're stored in the body, and how they can affect health and well-being? Can you pick up on this when you're actually doing massage, and how can you alleviate some of those things through that practice?
Yeah, you can pick up on that stuff. It's pretty interesting. And once you tune yourself into things, it's easier to do. I found, too, working with people, there are specific areas of the body that are connected to specific emotional things that are going on with them. Mm-hmm. And so if they complain of something going on with their neck or their shoulders, you kind of get an idea of emotional connections that could be going on. And you'll find, too, that the person will be holding it really, really tight. And if you distract them by talking about something else, all of a sudden they'll release it. So it's really kind of fun sometimes.
That's fascinating.
When
Walk me through how that happens. So, like, say you're working with somebody, you notice that their shoulder and neck is extremely, bound up and, hard as a brick.
Mhm.
How do you get them to release that? What kind of distractions would you use?
It depends on the person, and I mean, if you're doing massage, some people like to be really quiet during the massage and just relax and allow themselves to absorb in, excuse me, what what you're doing, working on the specific area.
Mm-hmm.
So they will, if they're in tune enough with their own body, they'll allow it to relax themselves. But then there's others that just hold it really, really tight, and you have to do something like physically jostle the muscle really gently, almost like you're rocking their body,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just watch the muscle relax as you're doing that. So, there's different techniques and different things that you would do, and a lot of it is dependent on the person and what's really going on with them and whether or not they're open enough to releasing.
Whenever you're working with somebody and you find out that they're not ready or prepared to talk about the emotional causes for some of their physical ailments, or they're not willing to release or let go of some of these things that you're seeing in your work, indicating tight muscles or stiff joints or something like that, do you just wait for the next session to go about that? Do you put those conversations off for a while, or do you just continue on with another location and just assume that they'll get to it eventually?
No, sometimes if I'm working with someone and I find that they're not releasing, and I know that it's an emotional connection, I may recommend to them that they try meditation techniques, and I give them specific examples of things that they can do to try and help make that connection in their own mind,
Mm-hmm.
and then teach them muscle relaxation techniques. Or I would even show them some stretches to just help them. And if it's an emotional connection, that person has to make that realization at some point in order to release it completely. So am I going to say to them, oh, I think you're fighting with your husband, and that's what's causing this? They know they're fighting with their husband, and that's what's causing that. It's just a matter of them recognizing it in their own mind and then releasing it. So you can't necessarily just say to the person, you need to work on this emotional part in order to release that.
Absolutely.
And then some people are open to that.
Yeah, some people just simply don't want to be confronted with, how much you're picking up on them.
Right. And some will get embarrassed saying, oh, you recognized that, and how could I let that slip away from me, that really secretive, private moment in my own head. So.
Yeah, just whenever people think that they're holding down their emotions and holding down their responses to things, they realize that they're more transparent than what they thought ahead.
Mm-hmm. Now with Reiki, it's different. You make a different connection with people.
Yes, I do. And I have had to teach myself over the years that I need to wait until I have a better relationship with my client and they have let me know when they're ready to open up about certain things, because confronting people with what I see too early has it's prevented a lot of rescheduling.
Right.
People don't want to come back to you if they think that you're seeing into them.
They feel vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't let people know that you're picking up on all the stuff that they want to keep hidden under a rock. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
In our last few minutes, let's talk about another kind of energy. I've read over and over again that our food is energy, and in Ayurveda, the energy that we're talking about is called prana. And real food has prana, and they try to incorporate real food into their diet. And all over the world, they try to incorporate real food into a diet because of its energy. And not just its chemical energy. Whenever you break it down, you're getting so many vitamins and so many macronutrients, but the actual real energy, the prana, life energy, the life force in the food.
Hmm.
How can choosing those kinds of foods benefit our health and our wellness?
The Ayurvedic principles are very specific, and there's four basic types of Ayurvedic personality, and then there are some combinations where a person could be a few of this or a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and so they're combined doshas. But what's interesting is a lot of that you can look in the books and try and categorize it that way, but the best way is through trial and error and see what really works for you and works for your own body. But everything has energy. We are a ball of energy. We're a very intricate machine, and it's run by energy. And food fuels it, just like gasoline fuels a car. So it's interesting how we'll choose what we put into this machine to fuel it, and knowing that eating the carrot is going to be better than having that French fry or that piece of candy. But how many times will we reach for the French fry or the piece of candy as opposed to the carrot first? You know, and then if we may have ill health experiences because of it, and we don't make the connection. But there is a vibration to everything, just like like you were saying with food having energy. There's a specific vibration to it, and some things are really good for us, and some are not. And we have to make ourselves more aware of what they are. We have to figure out how to make ourselves more aware to know what is good for us and what is not. One really cool thing about energy, and I always like to use Helen Keller as an example of this, because she was blind, she was deaf, she had a very difficult time communicating until Annie Sullivan took her under her wing and taught her how to be aware without having to see or hear. Mm-hmm. And Helen Keller was found to be able to navigate through a space after she learned to become aware. She could navigate through a room that she had never been in before, that had obstacles everywhere, and she could tell you exactly how big it was, what the shape was, what the color was, by the vibration that it gave. So it's one of the things that we somehow have lost the ability to recognize is the connection of energy with things, and how we have control of that too. We have control of what we're putting in our body, for example, and what we would get out of that by putting that into our body. But yet we still make negative choices.
Yes, we do. And it's so easy because, we can go down to the grocery and look in the freezer section, and there's a complete meal in a box. And all I have to do is take that meal from the cold box and stick it in the hot box and nuke it for a little while. And hey, that meal says it's got carrots and it's got green beans and it says it's got potatoes in it. Mm-hmm. But is it the same thing as really eating a real carrot and real green beans and real potatoes?
Yeah, we've lost so much of that. And partly because we don't have to make our own food anymore. We don't have to grow it. We don't have to prepare it like they did, hundreds of years ago. We don't have to make our own flour. We, like you said, can go to the grocery store and purchase what we want in a bag.
Yes.
So we seem to have simplified things, but at the same time, we've made it much more difficult for ourselves.
Absolutely. I read somewhere, and I try to stick with this, that if it wasn't food 100 years ago, it's not food today. And I think if we all took a little bit more stock in that, I think we'd be better off.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, Mary, I appreciate you coming on the show today. It has been a pleasure and an honor to have you here. We've really enjoyed your visit, and I wish you well in the future.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Well, that's it for our show today, folks. You are listening to The World Beyond. I am your host, Joe Weigant. You can always visit the website, reikichoice.com.
And we'll see you again next time. Thank you for tuning in.